Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co-hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Good evening, everyone. I am Jocelyn Turner. Welcome to pauseforthetruth.com. Now, if you're anything like me, you saw the title of tonight's show and you like, I can't wait to tune in. Yes, we are talking about marijuana. And it also has other names, so we are going to learn what it's all about from our expert panelists this evening. And of course, as always, joining me is Dr. Rogers Kane. Dr. Kane, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Ms. Turner. I am so happy that our guests are here. I really appreciate them taking the time out of their very busy day at the end of the day to join us. You guys can forgive my headphones. It helps hides my receding hairlines, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I am happy everyone is here. And at some point, we will get in, like as you say, we will be getting into a very interesting discussion about medical marijuana or marijuana in general, because not everybody gets it from a legal standpoint. We still have those guys out there that visit Ray Ray on the corner, so we're going to at least talk about it and see what we're up against.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started by introducing our guests, and one of our panelists will be joining us late, so we will introduce you to him as he chimes in. But I am excited that we have with us tonight, and you can wave because, yes, we are live on Facebook, so that there he is, so that everyone will know who our guests are. I will first introduce, and I'm going to start at the top. Of course, you see Dr. Kane and Dr. Samantha Thompson. How are you, Dr. Thompson?
I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And we also have Miss Holly Bell. How are you, Miss Bell?
Fabulous. Ready for Thanksgiving.
Oh, absolutely. It's
I
our
thought you were going to say
opportunity
Holly Berry. That's what I thought I was looking at.
I used to actually live on Holly Bell Drive here in Jacksonville.
Wow.
Years ago. And we also have Mr. Eric Range. How are you, Eric?
You muted.
Can't hear you.
Oh, here we go. Doing well tonight. Thank you for having me on the show. Excited to have the conversation with you all. And,
wonderful. Welcome.
and also what we can to educate your audience.
Absolutely. And you'll start with me, as you will learn shortly how much I don't know. Also joining us is Marcus Moore. How are you doing, Marcus?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. So this is a bit abnormal from the normal discussions we've been having thus far. The past couple of weeks, we actually talked about Medicare and Affordable Care Act and all that other good stuff. But, we decided to light up tonight, no pun intended, and talk about something a little bit different. And Holly, if you don't mind me calling you Holly, it's your fault because I actually met you a few years ago. We were at a meeting at the Jacksonville Urban League, and it had such an impact on me in so many ways, but I never had another conversation about it. But then when Dr. Kane and I were talking about what do we talk about next, I'm like, you know what? This is a real interesting topic, particularly during the pandemic, because people are finding relief from so many different things. And so tonight, this is a real good discussion. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So which one of you want to tell me, what is cannabis? What is cannabis?
Eric, you or Marcus want to go with that one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to tell everybody all of it is cannabis, whether we're talking medical marijuana, whether we're talking, what folks want to use as adults, with consenting adults, or whether we're talking about the stuff we can use to build houses. Scientifically, the plant's name is called cannabis. And so if you can imagine, just like many other plants out there, there's several different varieties of that plant. And so depending on what variety you have will determine what you get on the other end of it. But the cannabis plant is a plant that has been put on this planet for us as humans to be used for many different reasons. And obviously, since we're having a medical conversation tonight, I'll try to make sure that I tailor my my comments to that as well. And just to give you guys an idea, we use, when you go to the doctor, you have surgery and you're prescribed opioids and so on. It's because you have the serotonin receptors in your body to be able to, distribute that through your body and get to where the pain is. Well, we have so many more CB1 and CB2 receptors in our bodies that do the same thing for cannabis as serotonin receptors do for opioids. And so if we have so many more of them in our body than we do serotonin, I think that should tell us that this belongs in our body. Our bodies have a need for this. And so research has shown us that we have an endocannabinoid system. And there's a few doctors out there who have gone even beyond that and discovered the endocannabinoid and it really breaks down how this plant becomes, works together symbiotically with all systems in our body in many different ways. And so I am not a doctor, and I'll kind of stop there from that standpoint. But, this plant belongs in our body, on our body, and in our environment. And so, I'm happy to talk more about it and go a little bit deeper as we get into the conversation.
Go a little bit deeper, man. That was deep for me already. I never heard it broken down like that. Thank you. Dr. Kane, you had something to say?
No, I was going to ask Dr. Thompson, did she want to chime in terms of a clinical/scientific perspective? I mean, I can throw in something, but I think she'll do a better job at it. And besides, she looked better.
I can never look as good as you.
Right.
So in my experience, he kind of took every single thing I was saying. So likewise. But,
I tried to be quiet. Holly asked me to jump out there.
Do not. So with cannabinoids, because that's essentially what we're talking about at the root of it, it is a plant. So cannabis is natural. I think where it comes down to the controversy is its use properly between cannabis and THC, where I think people forget the only difference is the psychoactive activity with our neurotransmitters. That's where things get a little bit tricky. CBD is an excellent source of medicine. It's helped with so many of my patients with their chronic pain. It's even helped with anorexia with my HIV patients. You could Crohn's disease. I really don't see a lot of cons necessarily with it, especially since there's several ways to formulate it now. It doesn't necessarily have to be, smoked in a joint. There's gummies, there's paste.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to those. Okay. And from a horticulturist standpoint, a pseudo horticulturist, cannabis is basically a plant that has over 1,000 chemicals, constituents, and there's a chemotype, phenotypes, all that other stuff, in batches and in crops that you can grow, and even those, when you refer to as a chemotype, as a strain, it can be a bit misleading, and that's just for the science part of it. But I concur with my previous two guests and panelists that they're absolutely on the mark with what they're saying.
So is it dangerous? I mean, when you start talking about 1,000 chemicals, is it really safe for us to use?
Who do you want to address it to? Let's go with Dr. Thompson.
Well, as a pharmacist, the word pharma means poison. So anything that you ingest too much can be a poison. You can die from drinking too much water. It has to do necessarily with, in my opinion, with why you're using it, how often you're using it, and how does it necessarily make you feel risk over reward. So I do think anything can be dangerous. I have not necessarily heard of overdosing, but what can happen is you can change your brain chemistry if it's used inappropriately.
I will chime in and just to say, cannabis has been around for, goes back in medicine over thousands of years. But what it became a big issue was in 1937 when U.S. started its fight against cannabis. There was a couple of movies that came out, and so a lot of it was all political, to be quite frank with you, at the time. And so it kind of disappeared from Dr. Thompson recognized what this means, the pharmacopoeias of the world, which was basically our Bible at the time as pharmacists. I am my previous life was as a pharmacist, and so I know exactly what pharmacopoeia means. But fortunately, in 1950, we had some people from Czechoslovakia that really discovered cannabis as being there's an antibiotic principle to it, and they kind of got the ball rolling, re-rolling worldwide for medicinal use.
So what I don't understand, and I don't know, who can help me out with this, but when I see cannabis and marijuana and hemp and CBD, what's the difference between look, Eric is smiling, so obviously he knows I'm not the only one who feels that way. So I mean, do one of you want to take one? And Marcus, I saw you I got kind of a little smile out of you over there too. So can someone break it down for me? What's the difference?
So
The big difference is just the level of THC and CBD. In order to be considered hemp, you have to have, I forget the exact percentage of less than like 1% of THC.
0.3.
0.3, right.
And that's really the main difference. It looks the same, it smells the same. If you were to smoke it, like you can't tell the difference unless regarding the effects that you feel from THC versus CBD or cannabis and hemp. They're like cousin plants. And the only way you know the difference is through testing.
And are they used for different reasons? Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I started off that regardless of whether we're talking about what medical marijuana, it's important to talk about this from the regulatory frameworks that exist. So we have medical marijuana. California went first from a regulatory standpoint and implementing medical marijuana at the state level. Then we have Colorado, who brought on adult use. A lot of people call it recreational, but I don't like to call it recreational. Consenting adults can choose what they put in their body. So we use adult use. Okay. And then when we talk about hemp, so you have these three different regulatory structures, okay, that exist at both the state and the federal level. At the federal level, medical marijuana and adult use are illegal. Hemp is legal. At the state level, depending on the state you exist in, all three can be legal. So it is important to talk about it from that regulatory framework. But when we talk about it from the plant itself, it's all cannabis. It's all cannabis.
Oh.
Now, when you get into the actual growing of it, again, depending on what you're growing for, will determine the outcome. If you're growing for medical or even adult use, you're growing specifically for the cannabinoids that are in the plant. So you're going to grow, say, anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 plants per acre if you're growing outdoors, 1,500 plants in a grow room if you're growing indoors, that type of deal, right? Whereas if you're growing for fiber or you're growing for grain, when we plant very differently. We plant pounds of seeds. So if I'm growing for grain, which my company does, we plant 25 pounds of seed on 1 acre. And so that's thousands of seeds that grow right on top of each other, but we're growing it specifically for the seed itself, which most people, again, when we have this conversation about cannabis, we never move beyond the cannabinoid side and realize that the same seed we use to grow this is a superfood. It contains all the essential amino acids, your omega-3, omega-6, your fibers, your irons, your magnesiums. All of it is contained in that same seed that we use to grow it. So depending on what you're growing for will determine how you grow it and will determine the outcome of the crop that you get as well.
So Holly, you are with the Florida Department of Agriculture, and I looked you up. So yes, I was trolling you online, and it says that you are the director of cannabis. Now, what's the state of Florida stake in the game with this?
So my day-to-day job is to manage the hemp program in the state of Florida. So I came down here, we got a bill passed, we got the program up and going. So farmers like Eric can plant it. Hopefully companies like Marcus's can come down here and start working in the industry also. And so the hemp program that I run was first done at the federal level at the end of 2018 with the Farm Bill. They took hemp off the Controlled Substance Act, which made it federally legal and created the thriving industry. Then Florida got their bill and got the system up and going. So we do everything from grow fiber hemp, hemp for seed, hemp hearts like Eric's company does, to the essential oil, which creates what everybody thinks of as CBD, which is just one of the 100-some cannabinoids in the plant that has a purpose for our body. And then from that, you also can make all kinds of tinctures, strips, sublingual strips, food, edibles, gummies, topicals, creams, pain creams, facial products, hair products, all kinds of things.
Is that right?
Yeah. And as you sit in your home and in the rooms we're sitting in, and pretty much anything, your clothes, the flooring, the carpet, fabric can be made from industrial hemp. Marcus is sitting in a car. Porsche, most car manufacturers, BMW, use hemp composite parts instead of plastic parts now, or steel. And Porsche uses it on their race cars because it's stronger, more durable, lighter, makes the car faster. It's just a very diverse plant that can do a whole bunch of different things. And that's what the hemp industry is that we're creating here in Florida. Then we also have our medical marijuana program. And that, of course, is important for the patients and what they need and how the cannabis plant helps them. And then there's also the idea that there are some bills coming forward in this upcoming session that adult use will be passed. So we'll see where those go. But in the state of Florida, if you poll our citizens, we're polling well over 70% that say we should just have adult use. It would bring revenue to the state, and it would take people away from going to the person on the corner of the street. It would allow great companies like Marcus's company to come down here. So we'll see what happens in this upcoming session.
Yeah, and what I never, and sorry, Dr. Kane, I know I'm taking over, but go ahead. I'll wait.
No, I was just going to say, just from I always like to add in my medicinal whatever, just to make sure that as people understand, even though I mentioned 1,000 compounds before, there about 80 to 100 of them are really biologically active in terms of doing things from a biological standpoint. But as Ms. Holly said before me, there are the tons and tons of other uses for the plant in itself. And so I don't want people to get lost between various uses of the plant as it relates to hemp and its related non-biological components versus those that are biologically active.
So, Dr. Thompson, should I then expect that I will be able to go to my retail pharmacy and get some medical marijuana, or do I need a prescription for it, or how does that work? Eric is laughing. Does he?
Probably not at Walgreens or Publix. But so
Walgreens.
yeah, so I mean, you have to think about safety wise. That could present a whole nother set of problems for my co-pharmacists behind counters. We do live in a state that has a high population of addiction. Especially, so we have to start thinking about not just regulation, but safety for clinicians and
Makes sense.
pharmacists. That's the first thing. The second thing is you asked about medical marijuana cards. So medical marijuana cards are very interesting. I see a lot of success here in Jacksonville. It's really about the steps you take to get the card, as well as there's a limit to how much marijuana or THC you can get in a certain amount of time. So if you think that you are going to get the card like that, you're not. Your primary care clinician can make a recommendation. I have made recommendations for it, but you can make a recommendation and they would have to do almost like a referral system. They can help you do it, but usually it's not like just going to a specialist and they give you a sheet and referral. There's actually quite a bit of steps to it, and you have to have a checklist of diseases or disease states, such as chronic anxiety that cannot be alleviated by classical medication, alprazolam, etc. I've seen car crashes and traumas, certain traumas that you can talk to your care provider about, and they can help facilitate that. And once you get the card, it's not like a one size fits all. So, and then it's also not something that you're going to walk in and leave with like an eighth a day.
Yeah, and I guess that's been the thing that's been confusing to me. And I hope one of my friends is on, because a few years ago when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, my friend said, do you want me to make him some special brownies? And I'm crazy. I didn't know what that meant. I'm like, oh, I don't know if Dad eat brownies. You know what I mean? And so she had to break it down to me what the special brownies meant. So and forgive me for seemingly asking the same questions over again. So in my dad's case of having cancer, could he have potentially been a candidate for a medical marijuana card to help alleviate his chronic pain?
I can answer that because I was her dad's doctor. So yes,
but I didn't want you to answer that.
But I'm gonna let her finish up on it. But because I was his doctor, I can't bypass that, and I want them to know that he would have been a perfect candidate for it, quite frankly, because of what was going on with him. He was a perfect candidate.
And that's the candidates I get every day, especially with my patients, my HIV patients that have so much nausea and they can't eat. And we can give them Marinol. I can do all that, but sometimes, excuse me for saying, some good old fashioned pot is what they need to eat, to feel better, their pain. It addresses quite a bit of things, and it kind of relieves their anxiety as well. So there's a lot of benefits to medical.
So when Hollywood,
yes. Can I add something to that real quick as well? I think in particular, without knowing much about the audience, our communities in particular have such a very strong stigma against this plant, right? You'd be very hard pressed to find somebody Black or brown who hasn't come across someone in their family or their community or immediate, neighborhood who's either been arrested, killed, locked up, whatever the case may be because of this plant. So in our communities, because of that stigma, it's kept us from learning about the medical benefits that we could be benefiting from. And our aging populations could be benefiting. My mother's a diabetic. But I'll tell you, I as much as I'm an advocate for the plant, technology has brought us so far to where my mother will never have to smoke a day in her life just because she wants to consume this plant. And I think that's very, very important for people to know that if we're saying, okay, you get diagnosed with cancer, we're not telling you to go out tomorrow and smoke a joint. That is couldn't be further from what we would recommend for you. we would recommend for you to go to a doctor, talk about your particular condition, talk about the treatment options, and talk about, you know, ways that you can benefit from this plant, whether it be through sublinguals or tinctures, or whether it be through topicals or other different types of ways that you can ingest this plant without ever, and even sometimes, you know, if you are that person that says, you know what, listen, I really don't want that high, that psychoactive, then say that. Be open with your doctor about that, because again, they can be more specific about what can benefit you. But you know, when you get to down to the science of it, really, you know, it is a trial and error, because it's a plant, and every single plant is going to have some level of difference in that plant, right? But what we're looking for is the plants that contain the different compounds that will work for us. So, you know, we talk about the THC, the CBD, that's what everybody focuses on. But the real magic is in the terpenes, the flavonoids, the other things that come in the plant that really give you the effect. So, you know, most people have never heard the word terpene, but you're familiar with the concept when we say essential oils. So if I say to you, hey, go grab some lavender, what are you expecting lavender to do for you? To be calming, right? So if you're looking for
one of the things that we do, well, since he's mentioned that, oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, you froze for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, you keep kicking me out. Okay.
Yeah, with Eric, let me just say this. Since you mentioned that, the terpenes and the rest of those, the terpenoids, you know, the whole entourage effect that you get in terms of them grouping together with the rest of the more the two main components, the CBD and the THC. Those things give that entourage effect and help disseminate or spread out what the plant is capable of doing. I know we really we're talking about a lot of it. We're talking about for pain, and as relates to cancer, or loss of appetite as relates to cancer. But sometimes it's not. It's just plain old sciatica that has not been relieved with the pain docs injections of steroids and whatever other anesthetics they have, the opioids that they have, which can be much more detrimental under certain circumstances. So doesn't have to be that you need, and I want to make sure people understood that is only for cancer related patients, that there are other uses for non-cancerous related disease states and or just loss of appetite because somebody has dementia, they got Alzheimer's, and they're not eating like they should. For whatever reason, there are multiple applications for it, and it's not just, I don't want anybody to walk away and think it's just for cancer-related patients.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Thompson mentioned that she gives it to her HIV patients. And someone put a comment about stigma. And I think for me, when I saw stigma, what brought to mind for me is growing up, the use of marijuana has always been illegal. So how do I transition from, in my mind, there are parts of this plant that are legal for me to use, and how do I navigate knowing, again, we've talked about THC, CBD, which part of this is medicinal for me? Again, you say, Eric, when I go to the doctor, I really have a conversation, but you guys are the expert, and ladies are the experts on it. So I wouldn't even know what to ask for whatever chronic condition I have. And I do want to bring Marcus in, because Marcus, I know you are in another state, and so you may want to shed some light on, you know, what's going on other places that maybe we need to know about here in Florida or in Jacksonville that we should be doing.
That's a good question. I think asking a lot of questions before you consume is the best way to do it. And like, you know, for instance, you're gonna get a lot of the information when you enter a dispensary and talk with a bartender or a sales consultant, because they deal with selling product on a daily, hourly basis. It's a full-time job, and they have a lot of experience. And being able to leverage their experience to find the best option that fits you. And as Eric said, it is trial and error. You may try a topical, but you know what? I got some relief, but it wasn't as much as I wanted. I'm against smoking, but maybe I'm open to a vaporizer, so I don't have that smell in the air. And it's more of, okay, yeah, do I want THC or straight CBD, or maybe a mixture of both? It all goes back to asking those questions and understanding what you're putting into your body, and doing the trial and error from there. And then, like you said, each state is different. I operate in multiple states, and take Colorado for example. You can purchase 2 ounces a day, versus Missouri, where you can purchase 5 ounces over a 14-day period. So each state is different, and then what elements they allow for you to qualify for medical cannabis may change also. The main one that opens it up for everyone is chronic pain. But some states are a lot more restrictive, so their programs are a lot smaller. Again, overall, it's like it's a gateway into transitioning into adult use, where you just have the ID because you're 21, and you can just get it without having a medical card, but it still can be used for medical benefits.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we lost Eric. And Holly, I don't know if this is a question for you, but gosh, I can't believe, Dr. Kane, I had a loss of words, and that doesn't happen often. Gee, I know what it was. When Marcus was talking about how much that you can purchase based on what state that you're in, what about Florida? Is there a limit on how much you can purchase?
So in Florida, there are limits, but those are set by your medical cannabis prescribing doctor. And what happens is you go to the doctor, you get evaluated, they put you into the registry that the OMMU, Office of Medical Marijuana Use, has created, and they put in a prescription for you, parameters of the types of products you're allowed to buy and the quantity. And then you can walk into a dispensary and meet with the person that is there, that works there every day, knows the products, and will pull you up in the registry. And then they will show you the products that they have at their dispensary and match you up with what's appropriate based on what your doctor has prescribed. And that's kind of the experience that you have. And you have to go online and fill out some information and pay for your card. It comes in the mail, and it looks a lot like your driver's license. In fact, you can use the same picture and information from your driver's license. And
you put a comment in the chat. What is that linked to? So the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, it's the website. It's called knowthefactsmmj.com. And if you go there, it tells you anything about the medical cannabis program in the state of Florida and should help you with information. And then there's also a fabulous program through FAMU called Mary. And
Mary Jane or Mary?
Mary. Dr. Patricia Green Powell runs that for FAMU. And she is phenomenal. And their whole task by the legislative body was to educate people on medical cannabis and the use of it versus buying it illegal. So that program is also fabulous. You can go to FAMU and learn more about that. Oh, thank you. I didn't know anything about that.
Holly, I do have a couple of things I'd just like to get in, just a couple of questions, Ms. Turner, from a clinician standpoint, and a statement and questions. So, Holly, I remember going up to Tallahassee and participating in some of the lively discussions when we were first trying to get medical marijuana on the whole on the scene, as so to speak, and approved by the legislature, and once it got through approved by the legislature, going through the health, not ACA, and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. So one of the concerns I had at that time, even though I applied to be able to one of the clinicians to do it, was the fact that the there was a difference between what the feds were saying, okay, in terms of allowing medical marijuana use, and what the state is saying in terms of allowing medical marijuana use. And the fact that my DEA license would be threatened for encouraging the use of class 1 drugs, i.e., which is from a federal standpoint, the marijuana is marijuana. How did that conflict get resolved, if at all?
So part of how I feel like it got resolved is, the first one through the window always gets beat up a little, and the feds had to get used to the states descheduling it and making it legal. So finally, it got through to the feds that it's coming. We're not going to stop it. So there was, and Eric, you can chime in if you want. What I feel like happened was, because this happened on the banking side, there was an unwritten rule of if they're complying with the state law, leave them alone.
Yeah.
Don't mess with them. And they even put that in a budget bill that DOJ was not allowed to use federal funds to prosecute for cannabis if the person was compliant with the state law. And I think once that got thrown in that budget amendment, they started to back off. And I know I talk to the DEA on a regular basis. Their comment to me has been repeatedly, we have our hands full. Fentanyl, meth, heroin. We're not worried about cannabis. So that's what I think happened.
Yeah, and what Holly is referring to was initially entitled the Rohrabacher Amendment. But before the Rohrabacher Amendment, there was a Cole memo from the Department of Justice to the legislator, to the U.S. Congress, basically saying that the Department of Justice was going to have basically a policy of laissez-faire, hands off, if states enacted a robust regulatory framework. And if people in that state followed that robust regulatory framework, then the DEA and the federal government would stay hands off. So that is what allowed for that to happen. And then came, adult use, which kind of was saying, okay, now we're going a little bit further than we were before. And so, of course, and that happened under the Obama administration. Then under the Trump administration, Jeff Sessions rescinded that memo. However, the Rohrabacher Amendment was reaffirmed in Congress. And so even when they wanted to, under the Trump administration, they had no budget to do so. And so, that's why it is important to note for our communities that nobody's going to come knocking. The federal government, the DEA, is not going to come knocking on your door if you are registered in the state's medical marijuana program and you go into your state's legal dispensary, or as in our case in Florida, a medical marijuana treatment center, or MMTC. As long as you're following, and using the system that has been put in place by the state of Florida, you don't have to worry about someone coming to knock on your door.
And that brings part number 2, because I remember when they first came through with that, I was one of the first guys that signed up to do it. But I became afraid when it became saying that you got to report to the University of Florida, all this activity. And I'm going, okay, well, now the feds can go and track what my recommendations are. And here I am dealing with the DEA. Never mind. Okay. But so the next question, or at least the thing that I want to make sure I point out, is we keep saying your physician, your physician. So a lot of physicians did not sign up for this. And I just want to make sure people understand that there's a route by which your physician may refer you to other physicians who are legal certifiers, okay, have registered with the state to legally certify you to get a card. So even if your physician says he or she says that they are not qualified and or certified to do so, they can at least get you to someone else whom may be able to do that. And I'm done.
And the Department of Health, the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, has a complete list, a registry of all the doctors who are certified that is accessible to the public. So you can go, if you don't have a physician, if you go to that same website, knowthefacts. I think it's .com.org. I'm not sure, it was on the screen earlier. If you go to that website, you can get directly connected to the registry for find a doctor that you can go to in your area. And then the last resort I would tell you is find my organization, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We are the largest minority nonprofit in the space, and we have a medical director for our organization, as well as other certifying physicians within our network here in the state of Florida, and we can certainly get you help get you connected as well.
And what's your website?
It is MM United. So M for United.org. And that is Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Again, we help write part of Florida's medical marijuana law requiring the license holders to have a diversity plan and talk about how they're going to be diverse from a staffing, contracts, and equity standpoint as well. So, we're very active here in the state, both at the legislative standpoint as well as in the community, educating our communities about this.
Great.
So now you all have been talking about the legal stuff. I'm sorry, I still need to get back to the brownies. So what are edibles? And is this a safer way to use or consume marijuana?
I'll let someone else take that. I'll let the doctor speak on that one.
All right.
Okay. So
Edibles or go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, Marcus.
Edibles is something to eat. So whether it's a brownie or candy, or I would even consider drinks an edible. They could be a little bit. The thing about edibles is the time that it takes to digest for your body to receive the THC. And the common mistake people do is they don't wait long enough. So they'll have a piece and they'll say, "Oh, I don't feel anything," and they'll eat another one. And then it hits them, and it's going to be a lot longer onsetting process than what they anticipated. And edibles, the high could last a lot longer than smoking. So dangerous, I don't know if I would say dangerous is the right, terminology, but it can sneak up and get you. And people that do edibles, there's those who have and those who will.
You approach it with caution is what I definitely recommend to people.
Well, listen, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. I want to make sure I eat the right brownies.
But I would tell you, before you eat the brownies, you should definitely find out who the cook was. And then, I would take it very, very slow because you're right. And here's the difficult part with edibles is that we haven't quite dialed in when we talk about dosing edibles, right? Because that's what it comes down to is how are you ingesting? And then because of the unpredictable onset time, like Marcus mentioned, you could be, the onset time, when you smoke, onset time is immediate. It gets right into your bloodstream. You have just smoked something, immediately you're aware of that fact. Whereas with an edible, you can eat an edible and not get that onset time anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. And so most people, and where it can get dangerous, or again, like Marcus said, I don't know if dangerous is the right word, where it can get a little dicey for people is they take that first little piece and it's like, oh, I don't feel anything, nothing happened. And then
so they
go back and they go back and they go back. And then when it hits, it is like, you really just got slapped in the face. Now, again, the danger isn't there because you're not going to overdose, but you may get a very adverse psychoactive effect that, you may feel anxious, you may feel whatever the case may be. At the end result, you may not feel how you intended to feel. And that is enough to practice caution, because when you're ingesting it through your body, through your mouth, it's going to be broken down through your liver, and that's going to take a little bit longer.
Well, let me just discern I just want to make sure I clarify things. Being a clinician, I have to, and having formerly worked in an emergency room at times, While if you look at that classic terms of overdose, and then if you couple it with death, that's not going to happen necessarily that you're going to die from marijuana, overuse of marijuana. But there are symptoms related to overdose and things, including things like panic attacks and rapid heart rate and confusion and memory problems, obviously hallucinations, paranoia, all kind of stuff of that nature that can really make a person really feel sick. And I say that these are signs of overdose, and even to the point that where you may get a marijuana-induced psychosis, which really becomes an issue if you are a person who's kind of borderline with psychotic-related circumstances, for lack of a better description, that we have to be careful with those people. And then, of course, if some of these young kids, and when I say young kids, I'll leave the ages up to you guys to determine, but particularly if they are children who wind up getting a hold of their parents' gummy worms that are THC latent, so to speak, and they eat a bunch of that gummy worms, and we wind up having some significant issues in the emergency room that we have to deal with. So I'm not trying to dispute what anybody is saying, but you still have to be concerned with overdosing, maybe not to the point of death, and maybe that's what our guests were relating to, our panelists were relating to, but there is some really, really bad side effects with overdosing marijuana. Now, if you're just doing it as the physicians ask you to do so, and maybe some recreational, not, overutilization of it, then I don't see anything happening with it. But the unintentional overdosing is what I'm really trying to allude to, especially trying to allude to.
Dr. Kane, I think what you were, the street version I heard it's called green out.
Yes.
So if a person has green out, it can be traumatic.
It can be very traumatic.
I've seen patients feel like they're having a stroke. They're like, where is my face? It could get into a lot of psychosis. But another myth that I like to tell my family members or friends who like to text me is which will show up in your urine longer, smoking or edibles? The answer is still, it's not scientific. That's the first thing. If you want to not have any drugs in your system, you should probably not eat edibles or smoke marijuana. Or even in some cases, people have smoked CBD and still not passed a drug test because THC is still in the urine. So that is something that I do wanted to make clear, that, I just microdose, or I just take little, breath sprays of THC, or because if you go to Colorado or California, there's nothing they can't make that has this. There's absolutely, the sky is the limit. One thing I do recommend from people, if you don't know that person, it's hard to take a flower and break that down into butter, which is broken down, or you can do oil, and then putting it into your food. That is how these are compounded at the house. So essentially anything you can make with butter or oil, which is literally mostly how everyone cooks, can be used. I've seen patients put it on toast in the morning and they're fine. But we don't know how much is in each flour, is in each nugget. And you're taking these nuggets, and I've seen people get it down to a science. The only thing I recommend is if people do it, they get it from a place that actually manufactures it. So you're getting only 10 milligrams of THC in this Rice Krispie treat or in this gallon of lemonade.
I was going to say, make sure you spell flower out, FLOWER versus
yes.
FLO.
Sorry, let me clarify that. So flour is usually what we like to say the green, and it's ground up. You can grind it up, and that's how people usually smoke it. Flowers can also be used to describe hemp or any type of the plant.
The plant matter itself, yeah. I have to put on my advocate's hat as well, because I heard something about children and so on as well. And I you know, in particular, because our community has such a very strong stigma, I try to, you know, really actively work to break down that stigma, right? And I don't want to instill any undue fear about this plant to folks when we don't have that same fear about the things that can kill us. Okay, when we talk about, you know, your non-natural medications, pharmaceutical drugs, and so on, most of us don't keep those in a lockbox. Most of those don't, you know, they come in child-proof, child tamper, you know, packaging and so on, but they go right in the medicine drawer. They go right on the counter, and the kids have access to that. I would far, and again, this is not to say that I am advocating for kids to have access, you know, before it's time. I'm a parent myself, and I don't abdicate my responsibility as a parent at any time in this process. But we don't hold the same stigma about a kid seeing an opioid sitting on the counter as we do about cannabis. But if I had to take a pick of which two I would rather they got into, I promise you it would be cannabis every time. Because even if they had the worst of psychosis, I still know that the end result is less likely to result in death than it is with any opioid. I don't care what the name is. And so I really want us to be very, very, cognizant of that as a community. And the same thing when we think about alcohol. We don't put the same stigma on, did I get, here we go. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
we can't see you, but we can hear you.
The same thing with alcohol. You know, when we come home and someone comes home from a long day at work and they pour a glass of wine or they drink a beer, no one's running and hiding from their children when they're doing that. No one has hid from their children when they're intoxicated from alcohol. But yet there's an expectation that with this cannabis plant, we're going to run and hide from our children. We're going to run and not show them, when in fact what we should be doing is sitting down and have a conversation with them about the appropriate use of the plant, and that, you know, for them at their age, it may not be appropriate. It's not appropriate for my 10-year-old to drink a glass of wine. So it wouldn't be appropriate for them to light up a joint either. And that is my responsibility as a parent and no one else's.
Well, Eric, let me just make sure I clarify something. It wasn't in terms of picking on marijuana, in terms of children overdose. I don't care if it was a Tide Pod that looked like a piece of candy. You know, I was just making references to overdosing on medical marijuana since this was the subject, but that could go with anything. You have some opioids that look like the licorice candy coated in a white, the pills look alike. The good and plenty. You have some pills that look like it's good and plenty. So you got to be careful with your kids, with regardless of whatever it is. But since the subject matter was about medical marijuana, I wanted to make sure people understood that you need to keep any drugs, any alcohol, any adulterant substances that are not good for kids, keep them out of their reach, but by the same token, recognize the potential side effects that it can have in a person that it should not be utilized.
Yeah, I agree, Doc. And I think there's still a lot for us to learn about how this interacts with kids and their own personal development. So I'm 100% on board with you. I think
exactly.
But this is why it's important that we do legalize it at the federal level, so that we can get into the research and back this up by science. You know, Israel has done a phenomenal job on researching this plant, but here in the U.S., we've been really pigeonholed on the research front,
politicalization,
because of the fear, and that's at the federal level. So, I agree with you, Doc. I don't think we're on opposing sides.
I think that you're absolutely correct, and that is we do need to do more research on it, and that has been the thing that held us back the most in terms of the proper use of medical marijuana, because I am an advocate of it 100%. I just think that more research should be done so people can know better what to do and how to do it.
And honest dialogue, and I appreciate that, Doc, because I I'm not one advocate who believes that this is, a miracle plant and is going to cure all. There are some, we definitely have to, another thing that we don't talk a lot about is drug interactions as well. I know we have a pharmacist on board.
That was about to be my next question.
Yeah, see, I guess I already knew where you
So
were
you
going.
beat me to it, Eric. Really what I wanted to ask is about the reaction between marijuana and alcohol and prescription medications.
Marcus is trying to get back in. I don't know if somebody can let him back in.
Thank you.
Tyrone, let Tyrone, he take care of it.
There
Doc,
you
you're
go.
the pharmacist. I'll let you take that one on the drug interaction side.
Yeah, so I think we touched on this earlier. There is no overdose or, whatever, but we are still talking about a psychoactive medication for the most part. I have not heard of a lot of CBD interactions, but essentially if you combine alcohol, which is a depressant, and then possibly indica, which makes you sleepy. So a little trick I always tell my patients, they ask what strain to get. Indica will have you in the couch. So when you add that, possibly, or even if it's sativa or hybrid, and you possibly are also on a benzodiazepine, we could have some trouble. I never encourage my patients who are using medical marijuana to drive anywhere. I know it may seem like a good idea to drive to Burger King right now. It's not. That is, that's not
Dr. Thompson, I like how you said that so smoothly. It might seem like a good idea to drive.
Because you don't want to talk to them like you're their parent, but you also want to say the last thing you need is having unlimited amount of marijuana or THC, but you're also going through a lawsuit and possibly hurt somebody because you were trying to relax and you got into a car, or you operated heavy machinery, or you were trying to do something that required full cognition.
Even if it's not your fault.
Even if it's not your fault, if you are caught,
you're guilty.
You are guilty. So I always tell my patients who have a medical marijuana card, carry it on their person at all times. If you pick up medications from Walgreens or CVS or your pharmacy, this is a part of your medication profile. So you need to let your clinician and your pharmacist know, so we can at least do an interaction check. So we can at least give you education like, hey, I know you're on Xanax, totally fine. But maybe separate that out about 4 to 6 hours. Maybe I have a lot of patients that still don't understand benzos plus alcohol is just bad news bears.
Let me just remind everybody what benzos are. They are Xanax and Xanax-like drugs.
Yes.
I heard you referred to both of them, but for the people that don't, are not, right.
Because I'm a teacher too, so I'm like all the time. Sorry. But if you take those drugs, which are common and they're prescribed, but they are controlled substances, remember THC was still a controlled substance. So what you're talking about, they're controlled for a reason. And when you mix all of these, I'm not quite sure. I know tobacco has more clotting issues and coagulation issues. So we're not talking about necessarily that, but what we're saying is, if you're mixing psychoactive ingredients, you may have a psychoactive result. So please speak to your clinician about anything you decide.
And the psychoactive result may be one that you really don't want to have.
Right.
You can actually increase your green out chances, and that would be a nightmare.
Yeah, and I think the psychoactive part is one part of it, but I think just even, on a biological level, the drugs are also interacting in a non-psychoactive way as well. And that's still, we still have a lot of research to understand that part, as well as how do we metabolize this? Because we know for a fact we don't all metabolize cannabis at the same rate. And so I think when we're using this from a medicinal standpoint, the idea is what is the least amount that is going to give you the maximum amount of benefit, right? It's not the idea of how much can I consume to get high to where I feel nothing. It's like, how much can I consume, or how much do I need to consume in order to get the maximum amount of benefit in the stock. Because there is a place in which, you know, for instance, I think I was talking to another doctor recently, and they were sharing with me, I think somewhere between like 15 milligrams and so on, you get great effects. But then if you go to 30 milligrams, you might get, you know, a reduced amount effect. And then if you go to 85, you're getting more similar to what you were getting at 15. So, you know, milligrams are this is when we come down to the dosing and titration and really, consulting with your physician. That's why it's important that you do have a physician who is knowledgeable about the plant, who has done some more research, because they don't learn this in school. So they got to go and do this on their own. So you want to find one who has done that research on their own, who can really sit with you. And I know I dropped off earlier when you asked the question of where do you begin, just asking questions and feeling comfortable enough, to ask questions. And if you don't get all the answers right, then go away and then come back and ask more questions. Because, go ahead.
Well, let me say this, Eric, and I want to address this to Holly as well. Research is really one of the things that I'm hearing that really need to get into more research. But Holly, is the state looking at sponsoring some research efforts in terms of the effects and the treatment and the dosing and everything it takes to optimize the use, safe use of medical marijuana?
On a small scale, they funded the consortium at $1.5 million. I think that's woefully underfunded.
Yes.
And, and then they kind of handicapped them because they didn't give them the authority to grow. So, and I've asked them to change that, and it kind of goes on deaf ears. So, it's a catch-22 at some point. The legislators really need to step up and do more for it, in my personal opinion. We've asked for that on the hemp side, so we'll see what happens this upcoming session.
Yeah,
and we need to push our legislators.
Well, one of the things that is also in place right now is FAMU, one of our historically Black colleges, gets $10 for every medical marijuana card in the state of Florida. So everybody, if you go and get your card, they get $10 to do outreach and research. Now, the research component, as Holly said, their hands are a little bit tied, and there's a lot that goes into actually getting that off the ground. And so they have had some research, but it hasn't been. I think it's been more on the social, social justice side and than say the advocacy side. But there are groups out there who are definitely, doing research, doing data collection. That point of contact when you go to see your physician and you're answering questions about what you're experiencing at that point, and then you're getting recommended cannabis. It can be very informative for us. Now we have to go, like you said, beyond that and get into the clinical trials, which there are some. Dr. Damas down in South Florida has done some clinical trials on CBD and CTE in athletes, and so there are folks who are doing it. It's a lot on the private side, which again comes with its own set of challenges, and then but where we're lacking the support on the public side, I think this industry has been very, very, we don't sit and wait. You know what I mean? We're not the type of industry that likes to sit and wait. We'll go do our own research, and again, that has its own pros and cons to it.
So, Eric, a question was asked: is the state issuing, or Holly, is the state issuing more growing licenses, especially for minorities?
Ooh. Ha-ha!
I was
waiting on that one.
I wondered if that was going to come up on this this call. So
you want me to answer that, Eric?
Yeah, you start, Holly, and I'll come in after.
So I will be pretty blunt about this one. We don't have one minority permit holder that was issued from the state. We have one that was purchased after the fact. And I wish Marcus was on with us now, because his group is really trying to work on that effort down here in Florida. They've obtained several licenses in several states, and they do a fabulous job. So there was one license from the Pickford, it's called the Pickford class action suit, that was supposed to be issued years ago. And the OMMU has found reasons, not sure, there really is no reason. It hasn't been issued. And then recently they said, all right, we're ready to accept applications for the Pickford license. And at that day, on that announcement, they more than doubled the cost and tripled the complication of the application. And I was dumbfounded. And our commissioner in our office tweeted about it, and the Surgeon General did not like what we tweeted, but facts are facts. You can't ignore them. And there are 18 more licensed based on the numbers of patients versus the ratio of dispensaries and permit holders that the state established that are supposed to be issued. And, let's hope that 80% of those are to minorities, because that's what it should be, in my personal opinion. So
What can we do to make a difference? If can any of us do anything to make a difference?
I think call your elected officials, voice your concern, voice your displeasure. When you get involved, because your House members, your Senate members listen to you, and just be blunt with them and say, this isn't right. How did this happen? Why is this happening? We met with the Black Caucus, the commissioner and I did a month or so ago, to talk about a strategy to raise awareness. Why is this happening? It shouldn't be happening.
So does the state make money from medical marijuana?
No,
No.
not so much. The justification for doubling the prices, that's what they need in order to run the program. And again, I don't have any bones with them charging a fee. I think it's still, even before they doubled it, it was one of the highest in the country.
But it couldn't be. But Eric, it shouldn't be discriminatory. It's a problem,
right? And I mean, that's the point that I was going to get to. Like, I don't have a problem with the state charging for a license, right? The state has to operate and do its business. But again, when you look at a state like Oklahoma, where you get a license for $5,000, and then here in the state of Florida, we were at $60,000 before they doubled it to $146,000. You look at that, and I've been quoted in the newspaper, so I don't mind saying it here. This was more than just a slap in the face to Black farmers. This was a spit in the face to Black farmers. We have been waiting for years to get in. And when I say we, I personally have driven these streets to go to farms and educate our Black farmers about this, how to get in, how to get ready for it, get partnered up, and so on. I've put in the road, hours on this, and we really, we have really missed the ball. Back in 2017, when we put this set aside in place, Florida was really ahead of the curve in the country. People weren't doing this type of thing, setting aside a license and recognizing that our communities bore the brunt of the war on drugs. States weren't doing this at that time. It began to come about now, and social equity has become a big term throughout the industry. So you'd be hard pressed to go to a state in which the conversation of social equity isn't being had, except for when you come here to Florida. It's a non-starter for us to even mention the term social equity in our legislature. It doesn't go anywhere. And then in our one existing program, we have, Holly mentioned we have one license holder that's minority, and I'm gonna go out and say it. Yeah, I said it. They're not minority. If we look under the hood and we look at who's really in ownership, they are not minority either. And so we have 22 license holders in our state, and not one is Black owned. Not one. Okay, we're getting ready to issue another 18. Y'all do the math, and they're gonna give us one license out of all of those. It is a spit in the face. We should be talking about many, many more licenses. Not only did they double the fee, but then they said that if you don't get the license, this one license, if you don't get it, you can reapply, but you can't get grandfathered in. You got to pay that $146,000 again
all over
considered. Again. But that's not what they did. Remember, we have 22 license holders in our state right now. That means 22 organizations that have the license to grow, make products, and sell cannabis in our state for medical purposes, right?
Eric,
hold on, let me finish. Let me finish this point, right? Only 5 of the 22 have been issued through a competitive process. I'll shut up.
Yeah. So it's two things I want to say with that. One, it may not just be the fact that you're a minority. It may be all about who you know, what you know, how you know, and it's whatever. None. It may not all be racially motivated, even though I think it's significant.
I know them all. I don't have a license.
Right. Well, but I'm saying even, and I don't mean just about who you know. It's about who pockets you feed.
Right.
Feeding those, it's the economics of it, and who you feeding the monies to. Okay, the good old boy system, whatever it might be, how you want to term that. The other part, what makes it even more atrocious, is that when you look at the modernism in terms of African Americans, if you start, and I know I'm making this a bit somewhat pseudo political, but when you look at the number of us that went to prison under the umbrella of being selling drugs and yada yada yada, and it wound up being it wasn't just a misdemeanor; it was a felony. And then having that felony, it took away a lot of those individuals' rights to vote and have jobs and all the other stuff that there are martyrs. They're martyrs as it relates to other people being able to come along and get these marijuana licensures.
Yeah.
And so it's really, even like you say, a spit in the face, kick in the face, whatever it might be, that these same people that were martyrs in terms of assisting and making this happen are the same ones that are being excluded for whatever the hell the reason is.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned those who previously were incarcerated. Let's not forget, we still got people locked up right now.
Yes.
I mean, this still is not decriminalized at the state level here in the state of Florida.
Right.
And again, that's not from lack of effort. That's not from lack of trying. We put forth a bill every single year. In fact, my organization has requested funding from the state of Florida to operate our expungement program, which goes beyond just expunging their records, but providing them with wraparound services. How do we really get them a clean slate to re-enter society? So these are things that my organization is fighting on. And to answer the question earlier about what can we do as citizens? One, become a member of M4MM. Get behind the efforts that we're doing. We work closely with Commissioner Freed and Director Bell, throughout the state on a number of different issues, as well as with our legislators, with our Black Caucus and so on. So we are working to introduce language that addresses these issues. But I'll tell you, the big issue is whether or not we can get it to committee. And we have a Republican-controlled legislator. And so I need you, if you are in a district in particular, if you're in a district and you have a Republican as your legislator, your House of Representatives or your senators, we need their support, because that's the only way this is going to get on in a committee, get a true hearing, and get through committee and get to the floor for a vote. So we can't do it, by ourselves, just as an organization. Our Black Caucus, there aren't enough of them, and there's been, new members entered into it. So they're, freshmen and sophomore legislators now. So we need your support. We need you to email, make a phone call, get behind the initiatives, follow us, join us so you can get our newsletter and stay up to date. Those are ways that you can certainly get involved. But, making that phone call is really, the difference, and making sure that your legislator knows that you, as a constituent of their resident, feel like you're being left out of this conversation, like you're not getting access to an essential medication. Because remember, this was made essential during COVID. This isn't just a fly-by-night type of thing anymore. This was labeled essential under COVID-19. And so you need to make sure your legislator knows that you don't have access, safe access.
Well, I will say this, Eric, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jocelyn. I do want to get involved on this, not because, I want to go to Burger King, but mainly because, I think it's the right thing to do. It's the politics of the situation that really irks me when I just see an injustice that's taking place, and we're not getting behind remedying that injustice for whatever the reason may be. whether it affects me or anyone else, as Martin Luther King said in terms of his injustice statement. So to stand by and do nothing means you're going to go along with it. So I do want to get involved with it. And so you and I must communicate at a later date. Ms. Turner, are you still available, or am I flying by the seat of my pants? Speaking of pants, I got to say this comment. Somebody put in there.
I saw that.
Put it out. You saw that was funny. If the plant is used for a car seat, then will it cause my butt to go to sleep? Meaning whether it has the same effect on my body, regardless of how it is absorbed. I thought that was pretty cute.
And it's we laugh at it as well, but it's important that we actually answer it in all seriousness, because I think we don't have a lot of people who are knowledgeable about this in our communities, and so no question is silly. We want to make sure if you have it, we answer it. So to answer the question, the answer is no, because
unless you're not wearing pants, but okay.
No. Even if you're not wearing pants, and I go back to the cultivation side when I was talking about how we cultivate it, right? So if you were sitting in a seat that was made out of hemp, you're not sitting in a seat that was made out of the bud that people roll up into a joint and smoke, or that they extract the oils for to make tinctures. Okay, what you're sitting on is the fiber, the stalks of that plant that don't contain the cannabinoids and so on. So no, your body won't absorb any type of psychoactive cannabinoids or anything like that. So you are completely safe. You won't fail any drug tests, or you won't feel anxious or any. Well, you might feel a little anxious if you're still worried. I'm not telling you the truth.
Well,
but outside,
I guess
it should be fine.
I guess, given that, we were just kidding. All jokes aside, a lot of this is serious matters, but still, there's still some level of gaiety in terms of even when you're not using medical marijuana, you need to keep that just to keep a good head on your shoulders. Oops. So I think we want to just be sure that our audience understands that this is a serious matter. It can have good and bad consequences, not all of it necessarily as a result of utilization of drug, but lack of access to the medications, lack of access to medical marijuana and its intended purposes. For whatever it may be, anything from a physical issue, as in pain management and so on, including also anything from anxiety related issues or psychiatric related issues. It has its benefits. There are some downsides. A lot of it can be remedied if we really get to do the right research and reach out to people to understand and appreciate that medical marijuana can be, has been, and is a very beneficial medication or entity that we can utilize in everyday practices and everyday utilization to make life better for people. And we just need to get on the right train and get the research done. And so as an advocate for its use, which I am, proper use, an advocate for the proper use, I really want to thank you guys for coming on board. We've been here longer than what I expected to, but as usual with all of our podcasts, we get engrossed into these subjects and discussions, and sometimes we lose track of time. So I really want to thank everyone for coming. We got Ms. Turner, who's very astute at closing these sessions. So
did you panic, Dr. Kane?
Not in the least
he
little bit.
He did a little bit. He froze a little bit. Hey, Dr. Kane, I got a question for you real quick before we go.
Right.
Do you know who the fastest growing patient population for medical marijuana is?
No.
Baby boomers.
Oh, if you go from that, yes. They're discovering that it's not we were taught, I'm a baby boomer, and I'm proud to say so, because if I couldn't say it, I'd be dead. I'm in the baby boomer group, and during our generational time, if marijuana was a heathen amongst things to do worse than alcohol, worse than not going to church, so to speak, more or less, or the reason for you not going to church. So it was a heathen along that line. And so now some of these same baby boomers are beginning to realize that they were being misled and that it is very beneficial to them. And so, and even the baby boomers' parents, believe it or not, some of them are coming on board as well. They realize they've been deceived. So, yeah, I do realize that now for the proper use of it, not for the
exactly.
Right.
Well, I don't know, Dr. Kane, because I had a friend to tell me a few years ago, I'll be glad when I retire from the military so I can use marijuana freely.
They were probably baby boomers. Well, I want to thank everybody from my
standpoint. We just had a comment that clinicians also need to understand the breeding, cultivation, hydroponics, cloning, and other factors that impact the potency of THC.
Exactly. And we didn't get into that. Yeah. Yes, we didn't get into it simply because it ain't enough time. We're always saying we never have enough time to do any of our shows. Yeah, but we're going to welcome you guys to come back again. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. We definitely need to welcome you all to come back because we have other comments. My friends who are listening, they're texting me, leave me alone, stop it, put your comment in the online. But no, seriously, this is very good. Thank you, Holly, for connecting us to Eric and Marcus. And thank you, Dr. Thompson, for coming on. I don't know, while I was cut off, technology being what it is, did Dr. Kane give you all a chance to say your final thoughts?
Not yet. We just thought you went to Burger King, but you will be back shortly.
I went to bake some special brownies.
Boy, you got a fast cooker. Give me that cooker. Give me the name of that cooker.
Just kidding. Dr. Thompson, what are your final thoughts for tonight's discussion?
I thought it was a great discussion. With anything, especially, I think you made the comment earlier about the stigma. The best thing about getting into something new is being educated about it. And that's what this podcast is about. That's what Mary is about at FAMU. I've spoken on their panel. And we just have to educate ourselves on the risks and reward. This isn't just something just to, like you said earlier, to light up. This is actually saving people's lives. So I think if we take this as seriously, we can change the laws and we can also regulate it while we keep ourselves safe. But thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And Holly, what about you? What are your final thoughts about tonight's discussion?
It was fabulous. And I even learned some things tonight. So love doing this, would love to come back. And if any of you need anything from us at FDACS, or you just have a question that you didn't get answered tonight, you can email at cannabis@fdacs.gov. We monitor that 24/7 and we'll get back with you right away. And if you want to ask me a question, they'll get it to me immediately and I'll answer your questions. So reach out.
Could you repeat that, Holly?
I put it in the chat too. It's cannabis@fdacs.gov.
.gov means a lot.
And FDACS is Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
That is excellent.
I used to work for the state, so I know all those acronyms. Yeah. Eric, your final thoughts?
Yes, my final thoughts to everybody out here. Whether you heard something today that makes you go and talk to your physician and consider introducing cannabis into your own treatment or not. I think we can all agree that nobody should be sitting in jail or going to jail for this. And so for that, I'm calling on everybody to get involved. Again, whether you use it for a personal reason or not, we still, our communities in particular, Black and brown communities, we bore the brunt of this, and we certainly need to continue to keep our foot on the gas and making sure that as this new industry is coming online, that those people are not forgotten, because they're still sitting in jail, they're still voiceless, or they're out and they're now unable to vote or unable to re-enter society successfully. And we we as those who can, be a voice have an obligation to speak up for them. So that's my last words. Definitely find us, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We're all over the internet. Again, we have chapters all over the country. So no matter where you are, you can certainly tap in to the organization and get involved.
Yeah, Eric, and along your lines, someone made the comment, the same folks who benefited by putting us in prison are now benefiting by selling it to us legally. So, Dr. Kane, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts is that Holly, you did an excellent job. I'm really happy that Jocelyn brought you into the fold and brought you on our panel for discussion. In addition, you did an excellent job in bringing Eric into our family of podcast panelists. And Samantha, I know you quite well. You've always been knowledgeable, still cute as ever. Don't take it any other kind of way. Other than
She said, "Stop embarrassing her."
I love doing that. I always get her like that. So, and of course, FAMU being my alma mater, I'm always behind. Sorry, Wildcats, about this weekend.
I'm so sorry if the
I'm so sorry for you.
They probably need some medical.
Go get a new coach. Tell that Gator
Ah.
person to go get a new coach. Don't worry about this.
I'm really sorry. I just want to make sure anybody in the comments, like, if you're a Wildcat, we can get you a prescription. It's going to be okay.
They help cope with this weekend.
Everything is going to work out.
So
and we'll meet you in the parking lot up at Burger King and bring you some brownies. But anyway, guys, I really enjoyed this. I want to have you guys back. Sorry to hold you up from your families for so long, but it was such a great discussion. I'm sorry we lost the other gentleman, but maybe we can get him the next time around to get a more stable connection. But I am very appreciative of everyone that was here. And until next time, from my perspective, until next time, I will join our audience in another discussion next week. I don't know if Ms. Turner, you was going to get into it, but I'll say it because it does affect me as a clinician. We want to discuss the latest legislation that has been passed by the Florida legislature as it relates to COVID-19 legislation and rhetoric, not even rhetoric, but logic or illogical movements for next week. We're
hearing a lot of for our listeners. We've been hearing a lot of discussion and concern from folks who have made the choice of getting vaccinated and knowing that their colleagues are now going to be allowed to come back to work who are unvaccinated as a result of the new legislation. So that is going to be the discussion for next week's show. We would like everyone to have a safe and enjoyable Thanksgiving week. And please join us as we continue the discussion surrounded by topics of interest to our listeners. If you have any ideas for show topics, of course, send us a message at pauseforthetruth.com. Thank you, Dr. Samantha Thompson, Ms. Holly Bell, Eric Ranger, and Marcus Moore. Eric Range. Sorry, I put an R on Eric's name. Eric Range and Marcus Moore. I know Marcus dropped off. And thank you all for listening to our show tonight. And tune in next week for Pause for the Truth.